at the end of the day, if you can do what this other person can do, but you didn't go to college for it, you shouldn't be penalized for that.
Mm-hmm.
But like in your opinion, does the college degree hold, like, is that the piece of paper you need to get into the field anymore?
How do you figure out what language you can start with?
It doesn't matter. You just pick one and you run. I mean, Python is probably the most accessible, and there's the most out there because the Internet of Things has basically adopted
latched onto it.
Yeah,
and embedded coding is latched into it.
But ultimately, if you learn one language, you've not only have you learned that language, but you've learned how to learn, and it's not hard to go from .NET to Python. You know, when I started coding in Godot, which uses GD script, which is
an iteration of Python,
basically Python. Yeah, I think I spent like a week, and I feel comfortable now. I can write it. I don't think you need to put too much. Here's what I will say. I think every developer needs a object-oriented language under their belt, a truly like C# or Java, and then I think a scripting language like JavaScript or Python or something like that. I think if you know both of those, why? Because they're very different. Like the way you think of things in objects is very different than when you're writing procedural scripts, and there's a time and a place for both. If you're building something that is going to be very large and is going to be very componentized, you might want to consider objects because it helps abstract away very complex functions.
And ideas and
concepts.
Yeah.
Like I think every developer should understand the concept of an interface, the concept of abstract functions, when to use when to use what.
I don't think Java has interfaces.
Yeah, it does.
It does?
That's where I learned it. Yeah,
Okay.
it has I forget what they're called, but it has the concept of an interface and the concept of abstract classes.
Right.
So like when I went to C#, that was like, oh yeah, I got it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we say this to a lot of people too, is people like when it's like, oh, Microsoft shop, like, well, I only know Java.
Literally
that is not a barrier at all. There's 4 different types of programming languages, right? So there's object-oriented, there's functional, which is like C, so it's just like super function heavy.
Yeah.
There's interpretive, or is it really the scripting language? So that's like JavaScript. And the 4th one is it's what like Lisp falls under. It's like that. It's very amorphous.
Well,
and it can like build on itself.
Weird. I at one point in time I knew what Lisp was.
Yeah, it's like you give it rules and then you can give it stuff and then it builds itself based on the rules that you gave it, making new rules. And like I did it in A class for a couple weeks. It's programming languages. They went through the 4 different like schools of like, you know, functional, object oriented, whatever it is. Yeah. They skipped object oriented because they're teaching us C++ anyway, and like you already know this, like we're not going to spend time on this.
Yeah, is C++ like? Because I never learned it.
Oh, they totally changed it. So when I was in college, C++ was for all the classes, and then you went to that programming languages class, and then they teach you Java, and then you only do that for like a couple weeks, and then you move on. When I was finishing, they reversed it, so they converted all the classes from C++ to Java. And then that class taught you C++.
I remember I tried building a card game for the original iPhone where, what was the language you had? It was like do you remember? It was like a variation of C++.
Objective-C.
Objective-C. Yeah, I had to learn Objective-C. And I think I brought this game to work one day. Me and a buddy were playing it. I like deployed it on an iPad. And
I think I didn't play it, but yeah, I think I remember the day that you guys were playing it.
Tentrio is what I called it. It was like a game a buddy of mine made up at a coffee shop. But I made it for the iPad. And I remember I hit a wall because I wasn't managing my memory correctly, and I kept getting memory leaks, and the game would just randomly crash, and I just got so furious. I'm like, I shouldn't have to worry about memory management.
But when you get to C and C++ or Objective-C, like you have to deal with it.
Yeah. So I've that's what turned me off from those languages. I will never learn how to manage memory. I will always just write a using statement and call it a day.
I mean, me and my 2 partners for our operating systems, we got a little crazy one day, and all of our variables were bufferino. It was a nightmare to debug.
Bufferino.
Yeah.
Huh.
We were done with the class and just like, we don't know what we're doing, so everything's bufferino. Caution to the wind.
Yeah.
We're gonna get this done with bufferino. It was atrocious.
To your point, though, yeah, I would agree. Learn at least 2 or more of those types of languages.
Yeah, just grow some fundamentals.
Yeah, and learn a database framework, because at the end of the day, everything you build, you have to save it somewhere. And sure, you could use a text file, but I would encourage you not to do that. NoSQL, there's tons of flavors of NoSQL that are really easy to consume. Even SQL or MySQL or
they're
learn
easy.
something. Yeah. Postgres. Yeah. Going full circle back to this whole like debate: do I do college? Do I do a boot camp?
You do nothing at all. And
do
just
I do nothing at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first started, my journey to being a developer was very unique because I knew a guy, and that basically carried me into my first job. I went to Marquette as like a 16 or 17-year-old, and I was the youngest person in the class, and there was another guy who was the oldest person in the class, and he just so happened to be friends with the guy that I played computer games with. So like we had gone to LAN parties together. I kind of knew him. He kind of recognized me, and we gravitated towards each other in this Java class at Marquette. And he was in a similar boat. He didn't have a college degree, and he was trying to like he was probably 30 at the time. He's trying to get his last 2 credits to graduate. So we sort of, as the oddballs, we gravitate towards each other, and we build this game. He did most of the work. But he asked me, hey, do you want an internship? And I get like it wasn't even a coding internship. It was a IT internship. I was like the guy that installed the printer drivers.
Yeah.
But eventually I got an opportunity to code there. This was the place where you and I ultimately worked together. That's not normal. Like that, most people have to go to school, get that degree, and to get their first job. But I didn't. I knew a guy, and I built that relationship, and that worked really well for me. But something happened, and I became really good at what I did. I worked there for 8 years. I knew the application really well, and I was really confident in what I could do. But when I tried to apply to places, they wouldn't consider me because yes, I had 8 years of experience, but I didn't have a college degree. And it was very, it limited what I could do. And I ultimately figured out become a contractor because
at that point, so you're a contractor through a different company though.
Yeah, I went to a company who they basically do contract work for other companies. So if you were a startup company and you needed developers quick, you call this firm and they find contractors for you. I was one of those contractors.
With the expectation of they are only contractors, not contract to hire. Like you are temporary work.
Yeah, and they do have
contract to hire. Like that's an option. But the route that you were in, it was no. I'm going to be in and out, get the job done.
Yeah. So they don't care about your background. They just care about can you get the job done. And I knew I could. So I do this, and it's funny. That was the moment I learned .NET. I had to because I was hired as like.
Well, I remember you going through all those ERP books and like.
Yeah,
I gotta figure this out.
It was like the worst case of imposter syndrome because I get this job, and I knew enough to get hired, but I didn't know how to do the job. So it was like I showed up to work. I figured out all the problems that I was gonna have to solve. And then I went home and I learned like how do I do X, Y, Z, and then I came to work the next day and I did it. But that first contract taught me how to build confidence, and then I got another contract, and then another, and then eventually I had these like people I could call, like I could call those businesses that I worked for and say, hey, remember that awesome job I did for you? You want to give me a job? And that's how I got my permanent position now, was one of those businesses that I contracted for. They're like, yeah, you're a proven commodity, come on board. But had I not done that, I don't know if I would have been as successful. Now I think that's changed. I don't think people care so much about college degrees anymore. And because I know I don't, but maybe it's just because I don't have one, so I'm sympathetic to people that don't.
Right, because it's because you see that people can come from anywhere.
Yeah, I care more about what you can do and less about
How you got there.
How you got there, and not that I don't care, but like at the end of the day, if you can do what this other person can do, but you didn't go to college for it, you shouldn't be penalized for that.
Mm-hmm.
But like in your opinion, does the college degree is that the piece of paper you need to get into the field anymore?
You know what's funny is I think like to your point, I think what Google, Facebook, places like that, I think they're easing up on that.
It's changing.
requirement.
Yeah, it's changing.
Like, that's for sure. I don't know. It's weird, and maybe this is me being a little bitter about it, but like I would say, like, again, I got my college degree. Actually, even when I was still in college, it took me about 2 years before I got my first internship. Like, I'm applying. Sometimes I got an interview, but like when they're doing the interviews, like it's going to the career fairs and they're mass hiring a bunch of people, and then sometimes you're at the bottom of the pile or something, and then they start becoming more selective.
Yeah.
Right. So it took me a minute, when you're going for positions, right? Just because you finish a dev code camp, just because you finish college, like getting your foot in the door is just hard in general.
Yeah.
Like I said, for me, and maybe it's because of knowing you and just some of that stuff, but like I feel like getting that first job for me, like I said, took me 2 years. Now everywhere that I've been, it's been relatively easy.
Yeah.
Now, again, maybe that's because I have a good head on my shoulders, whatever it is. But like, I applied to the next job, one and done. Like, cool. Like, that's where I want to go. They said, hey, here's your job. Cool.
Yeah, I think
see you in a couple weeks.
It gets easier as you get older because you know people, and people tend to move with each other. Like, I feel like you have at least probably a dozen people you could reach out to and say, hey.
Well, they all work with me right now. So
well, some of them don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, or if like I were to leave, like it wouldn't take too long before I called you up and said, "Hey, Chris."
Hey, do you know someone that's it's all great. It's all grapevines,
But yeah, when you know nobody, and it's like everybody's kind of starting at the start of a race, and you got 30,000 people that are looking for jobs in an area. Like, it's hard. It's hard to get that.
Well, now we're in a national market, right? Because after
everything's
COVID
remote.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it's shifting back to not being remote.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other
episode
thing. Yeah.
I can't remember if we were talking about this on or off air, but we talked about like a college degree doesn't guarantee you're going to be good, but the type of people that persevere at a 4-year college and it takes them 6 years to finish it, or they're working nights and weekends. Mm-hmm. That type of person generally is going to succeed in life.
Well, so again, this is coming back to the second part of what we were talking about, right? Is that's where I don't think I would have been as successful if, they say like, oh, being a software developer, you're going to work 50, 60 hours. Well, your full-time job is going to not be maybe 30 to 40 hours, but that extra 10, 20 that you're going to put in every week, that's self-learning.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like it's some people just have a natural knack for it. Sure, good on them. But like for me, I know I work well in a workplace, and I need something to apply myself towards. So just like you mentioned about like, hey, I'm coming in to work tomorrow. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, I'm spending last night learning.
Yeah,
I got to figure it out somehow. And it might not be the right way of doing it, but at least it's all way of doing it. And then somebody's going to tell you that you're wrong, and that's fine. And again, back to humbling yourself, right? Sure, I did it wrong. Who cares? Tell me how I should have done it.
Yep.
Let me learn.
Yeah. So I think we can all agree that like you don't need a college degree,
and nor do you have to do boot camp.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on who you are.
Yeah, and I think companies are more willing to offer you an opportunity if you have the experience.